Joker Folie à Deux, or as the streets like to call it, Joker Folie à Deux. This movie has been getting chokeslammed by regular viewers and critics alike, people calling it one of the most disappointing sequels of all time, and it's honestly for good reason. The first Joker movie was a perfect self-contained story in my eyes. Joker is a story about people misunderstanding each other, and how quickly that misunderstanding can turn into anger and violence. It's spreading a simple message to be kinder to one another, to treat each other better, especially to those you don't fully understand. Meanwhile, with Joker Folie à Deux,
I'm gonna shove these fucking games up your ass! Batman Revenge of the Joker!
yeah, so it's hard not to think the goal of the second movie is just to be a massive middle finger to the original and its fans. Rather than having Arthur continue on with his Joker persona and newfound confidence, he totally regresses back into how he was at the beginning of the first film. This is mostly done because the main plot point is that Arthur is going on trial for 5 counts of murder. They didn't know about his mom, and I guess the whole killing the psychiatrist thing at the end just didn't happen. And his defense is going to be that Arthur and the Joker are actually split personalities, that the Joker killed all these people and not Arthur Fleck.
And I've got to say, in all honesty, it's the biggest piece of dog shit that I have ever heard.
This was already downright horrendous writing because we've seen the first movie. We know Arthur Fleck doesn't show any signs of dissociative identity disorder. The Joker was quote-unquote created when he starred on the Murray Franklin show, wanting to be called that because that's what Murray called him when he made fun of Arthur, a Joker. Arthur was clearly in control that whole time. This leads to a lot of redundancy and bloat that makes for a very slow-paced, boring movie. Speaking of redundant bloat...
Hello, my baby! Hello, my honey! Hello, my ragtime gal!
Believe it or not, I actually was excited for the musical aspect of the movie. I'm quite fond of musicals when they're good, and I think it'd be fitting for characters like the Joker and Harley, who always like to put on a show. I also just thought it might mix well into that weird, unsettling vibe that the first movie established. So you could probably imagine my disappointment when I found out most of the music is just awkward mid-conversation half-singing and dream sequences. A good musical is supposed to use music to entertain and to further the narrative. And while, sure, some of the music is pretty entertaining, The Joker Is Me was really good. All of them felt intrusive to the story rather than contributing to it. All of these sequences felt like freaking commercial breaks because if you removed all of them, you wouldn't be missing out on anything from the story. Nothing from the plot would have changed if you removed these sequences, and a lot more would be accomplished during that screen time if the characters simply just talked. This is actually something that drove me nuts too, is the lack of screen time Lady Gaga's Harley Lee had. I forget how afraid of the source material they are sometimes. It felt like she was Harley in the movie, and to be entirely honest with you, she doesn't play much of an important role either. Anytime she's on screen, she's just there to sing, which is just such a waste of an opportunity to showcase Gaga's acting ability. To sum up Lee's character in a nutshell, she loves the Joker, not Arthur, and she fully believes those are two separate things. She uses singing to dodge conversation and drag Arthur back into, falling in love with her into Delulu land, and it gets really old really fast. Oh, and Arthur supposedly got her pregnant. Honest to God, I really couldn't tell you why her character's even in this movie, other than just to bring down Arthur's character even more because this movie has a huge boner for doing that, and to sing, because it's Lady Gaga, of course. Despite all the criticism I've already given to this movie, there is nothing, I mean absolutely nothing in this movie I hate more than the courtroom drama portion.
I was promised a chance to defend my client.
Oh, very well. Like it'll make a difference.
The courtroom drama was by far the worst of Joker Folie à Deux. Most of it was just recapping information from the first film, flashbacks included, that we already know about, and Arthur using a defense that we as an audience already know won't work at all. There were low stakes, we all knew the outcome of this trial, it made for a complete snooze fest. Eventually, on the third or so day in court, Arthur fires his lawyer, puts on the Joker makeup and suit. This is when I thought the movie was gonna take a turn for the better, not because I thought it would turn into some Joker action movie. I know a lot of people like to hate on others for wanting that, but because we'd finally get to see him with all that development that we got from the first film that just hasn't been present so far. But what we got instead was just a much weaker performance than what we got at the end of Joker 1. It's honestly nothing like what we got at the end of Joker 1, which I know a lot of people, including myself, wanted to see more of that Joker personality of his. But Arthur instead just puts on a silly southern accent, doesn't really make any good points, and doesn't defend himself at all. He also talks a lot of shit about the guards at Arkham, which comes back to bite him in the ass, quite literally. The one cool thing we do get from this is we get to hear Mr. Puddle's testimony. We get to hear that despite Arthur not hurting Mr. Puddles physically, it still ruined his life by mentally scarring him. All credit to Lee Gill, by the way, for such a good, incredible, well-acted performance. It was definitely the most emotional scene by far. In my opinion, this would have been a great transition into Arthur admitting that there was never a Joker, taking accountability for his actions because he realized he hurt his only friend in the crossfire. That would be some decent writing, but nah, we gotta ruin it somehow.
Batman on Congress 64!
I shit you not. The scene immediately after this one is them going back to Arkham, where Arthur gets confronted by the guards that he shit-talked on live television. You know, they start roughing him up a little bit. They're like pushing him around and whatnot, but they eventually push him onto the ground and then start stripping him, and it just cuts to the next scene. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out what happened there, but like, my God, I know you hate this character and you want like the audience to, I guess, feel humiliated for liking this character. I think that's the message of this film, but Jesus Christ, it's distasteful. Well, after all that, we go to the next day at court. Arthur shows up in full Joker attire, but he just can't do it anymore. He breaks down, starts crying, admits he committed all those murders and that he also killed his mom as well, which nobody knew at that point. That there never was a Joker. It was Arthur Fleck and Arthur Fleck alone that committed all these atrocities.
No! This is not how this was supposed to go!
Let me clarify. I'm okay with us getting to this point where Arthur gives up on the Joker identity, takes accountability for his actions. It's just how we got there that was so ass. You're telling me he just got the Joker violated out of him at the end, and to make things worse, nothing bad happens to these guards at all? How would anyone think this is satisfying to watch? But wait, because we have to subvert expectations and surprise the viewer, so a big CGI explosion happens out of nowhere in the courtroom. The explosion was caused by Joker superfans, and they attempt to escape with Arthur in their car. Once Arthur kind of pieces together what's going on, he decides to hop out of the car and looking for Lee, because she stormed out of the trial. I forgot to mention that because honestly I forget that Lee's even in the damn movie, and she's just conveniently at the iconic staircase from 2019 Joker. So of course Arthur walks up the stairs to Lee and talks about how he just escaped, they could finally be together like they always wanted. But Lee doesn't want Arthur. She wants the Joker, and Arthur did say there never was a Joker. So naturally, she dipped, called the cops on his ass, and said, "You're paying child support. Bye." Going back to my whole "this movie has a redundant bloat" spiel, isn't it funny that if you remove the explosion, Arthur escaping, and the whole scene where he meets up with Lee on the staircase, that absolutely nothing would change? Because he ends right back at Arkham, which is where he was going after the trial regardless. And then we get to one of the most dookie, dog water, horseshit endings I think I've ever seen in a movie.
That's not funny. That's not...
One of the Arkham patients that has been in the background of a couple of scenes walks up to Arthur. He says he has a joke for him. I honestly forget what the joke was, but like the punchline is blah 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 blah, you get what you deserve. And then he just shanks Arthur, and while he's bleeding out on the floor dead, in the blurry background you can see the inmate carving his smile into the face with the knife he just used to kill Arthur. If it wasn't clear enough that this movie hates its own audience and hates the fact that people like the first Joker, This ending makes it clear as day. It hardly didn't even have the shock value it was so desperate to have because it happened at such breakneck speed and it was so random that there hardly was any emotional impact. And to make things worse, this ending completely went against the wishes of Dark Knight's director Christopher Nolan.
Now that's not funny.
So I'm sure you all remember the scene in the original Joker movie where Arthur smears blood across his face as a smile. Yeah, so that scene was originally going to be him carving a smile into his face, and that's when Christopher Nolan stepped in and said that we couldn't do that because only Heath Ledger's Joker should be able to carve a smile into his face. But now that Christopher Nolan has left Warner Bros., Todd Phillips used the carved smile as soon as he could in that ending of Folie Deux, effectively just spitting on the face of the best live-action Joker we've ever gotten, let's be real.
You think you could steal from us and just walk away?
Yeah.
Something funny I keep seeing on the internet is how everyone will either praise or bash a movie day one, then after some time has passed, they just completely flip opinions. It happened to Deadpool and Wolverine, and somehow it's already happening with Joker.
Yes. Media literacy must be dead. By hating the movie, you're proving the film's point. You'd rather see a man driven into lunacy rather than him taking accountability for his own actions. Besides, the Joker was never just a man. He's an idea, a philosophy. Arthur was never going to become the Joker.
I honestly think that's how some of these people think they sound. Honestly, though, this movie did have some potentially good ideas. It just doesn't really matter if those ideas are horribly executed. It also doesn't help that the movie's boring as fuck. And the whole the Joker is an idea thing I keep hearing about, to a certain extent it's true, but he's not a copycat killer, and that's what the ending makes it out to be. Look, I know I've been bashing Folie Deux this entire video, but it wasn't the worst movie I've ever seen, not by a long shot. That's Borderlands.
It's Pete. It's Pete. Why do you think it's called Piss Wash?
But it wasn't even far off from being decent. If you just removed some of the musical blow, reserve it for when it truly furthers the narrative, let Arthur keep his development from the first movie, you could strip it down later, make him not the Joker at the end, that's fine. But not being able to see Joaquin do his thing, that was extremely disappointing to a lot of fans. Hell, I think Lady Gaga was underutilized. I would have loved to see more of her and for her to actually act rather than sing. And again, I don't hate musicals at all, I just think it was a poorly done musical. You know, I could go on and on about what's wrong with this film, but I think I've gotten my point across. Joker Folie Deux was a half-baked sequel that tarnished everything about the original. It's clear the goal of this movie was to antagonize the fans of Joker 2019, and I think it's safe to say they succeeded.